Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, March 21st. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The spring game is in 26 days, the Notre Dame game in 166 days, the game against Michigan in 250 days. It was a big weekend in Ohio State athletics as the pistol team was crowned national champions after winning the Team Air Pistol Championship, the Team Sport Pistol Championship, and the Team Standard Pistol Championship, so congratulations to them. And then on Sunday, the OSU women's hockey team won its first ever national championship, knocking off Minnesota Duluth 3-2 to claim the title. Congratulations to former Morning Scoop guest Nadine Muzzerall and her team on that title. She has done an insanely good job building that program. I'll put a link to that interview that I did with Nadine about a year ago in the show notes for this one. She is a very, very, very impressive woman and very impressive coach, so make sure you check that one out. And in somewhat less fun news for Buckeye fans, the Ohio State men's basketball team also played over the weekend. Their team's run through the NCAA Tournament ended Sunday in Pittsburgh with a loss to Villanova. Buckeyes were down 15 at one point in the second half and then battled almost all the way back. Got the deficit down to 2 with about 5 minutes left and then never quite got it closer than that. So Kevin Noon was there to cover the game in person. He joins me this morning. If you hear some banging in the background, that is the NCAA crew tearing down the workroom there all around him. So Kevin, thank you for joining me in, kind of typical conditions for post event. We're sort of used to this at this point where they're kind of tearing everything down around you. So thank you for joining me.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, everything's getting torn down, sort of like what's going to have to happen after this season with the Ohio State basketball team, because they're going to be losing a lot of guys, not to get ahead of ourselves, but they're going to be doing a lot of tear down as well as they try to build back up, load up, and do this again, because the season comes to an end. They're tearing things down here in Pittsburgh. The winners are going on to San Antonio. I thought I was going to be maybe going to the Alamo City, and lo and behold, a little bit of a stinker for large stretches of the game. Ohio State claws its way back, but just can't get over the proverbial hump, whether it's the deficit to Villanova, getting out of the second round of the NCAA tournament, all hurdles that they're just struggling to get through.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to feel like something was a moral victory in what's a do-or-die game if you don't end up actually winning the game. Like, there are no moral victories in March, but, I mean, the Buckeyes definitely gave Villanova quite a run, and that's a very good Villanova team that could be a Final Four team or beyond. But the first half of that game, man, that the Ohio State offense struggled again in the first half. That Villanova zone was giving them fits. It seemed like if Malachi Branham and E.J. Liddell weren't scoring, you were just constantly seeing graphics. Ohio State is in a 2:30 scoreless streak. Ohio State's in a 3-minute scoreless streak. It felt like that happened like 3 or 4 times during the first half. If it wasn't Branham, if it wasn't Liddell, they just were not getting the ball in the bucket in the first half.
Exactly. I mean, Ohio State came off of an offensively challenged game against Loyola Chicago, comes out, hits their first 3, but it did get very ugly early on. They just weren't getting good looks. The defense was really bothering them. Obviously the Loyola Chicago played a much more physical type of defense, but Jay Wright has been running his system at Villanova for a really long time. He has been there. I mean, it's kind of like the way we talked about the 2-3 at Syracuse with Jim Boeheim, and they've been running it forever and ever. They know what they've got there. I mean, they're a team that has a lot of length, even if they're not a huge team. They're a long team, and it really bothered Ohio State a lot. And I think it's kind of a situation of where we're talking about this Ohio State team over the course of the season. If it isn't Liddell and it isn't Branham, who is it? And, there just has not been a consistent third guy. I mean, it's a very different team when they have Kyle Young, but, how much would they have benefited having Justice Suing over the course of the year? I mean, obviously they would have benefited if Dwayne Washington wouldn't have left and gone off to the league, but that it is what it is. And the injuries that Kyle Young had to deal with, they are what they are. And Ohio State just kind of ran into a bit of a buzzsaw, but to their credit, they could have given up and they could have lost this game by 30. I mean, 2s beat 7s all the time. I mean, that's not something that is foreign to us, but Ohio State turns things around in the second half, has a pretty good run, but comes up short.
Yeah, and Kyle Young, I think you probably in the last 2-3 weeks, if people didn't understand the importance of Kyle Young to this team, they kind of got it, laid quite bare for them in the last couple weeks. When he missed those last couple games of the season, they looked like a totally different team. He comes back for Loyola. They kind of gut out a good tough win against a good Loyola team. And, one of the big turning points on Sunday came in the second half when He had to leave the game after getting, yet another blow to the head. That poor guy just can't catch a break. Happened with about 9 minutes left. The Buckeyes down 6, and they had cut that lead from 15 down to 6, and they were, it seemed like, okay, they really are on the verge of maybe taking control of this game. And then he goes out. He doesn't come back. He was someone who did so many different things for them this year. They really looked like a different team when he wasn't out there.
I'm never going to say Kyle Young is David Lighty, but their value to their respective teams are the same. We talk about glue guys. David Lighty was a glue guy. Kyle Young is a glue guy. And I think that if they keep Young for the entirety of the game, and I'm not saying that it's going to be a different outcome, but I think we see things go down a little bit differently, because at that point we see a lot more Zed Key, and Zed Key was coming off injury as well, and I just don't think Zed Key had the confidence that he had earlier in the season. Even pre-injury, I think that he'd kind of hit a little bit of a wall. So they sit there, that you lose Kyle Young, you lose your glue guy, you lose your leader, you lose the guy that gives you kind of that spark. And, to their credit, that's a 6-point deficit. They get it down to a 2-point deficit, and they're not able to get there. But, yeah, you got to feel for Kyle Young, because the guy can't catch a break. And the blow happened on the side of the court that I was on, but it was over on the opposite end, so I never really got to see it. So I was, a little shocked when I saw him on the ground, and that they didn't go to the monitors or anything to look at it. I don't know really what happened there, but I jotted a note down. I said, "This is big."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was, and it definitely turned out to be big. Another thing that was really big, just an absolutely killer stretch from the 355 mark to the 138 mark. There was long stretches of that game where it felt like every time Ohio State got a bucket, it was like, oh, maybe they're building something, Villanova would go down the floor and answer. From 355 to 138, they held Villanova without a basket. Held them 0 points, 0 field goals, 0 everything. They were only down 5 points, I think, at the time. Yeah, down 5 at the time. And it was like, okay, a bunch of defensive stops. All they got to do is all you got to do is put the ball in the basket, and you can cut this lead, maybe take the lead. Instead, E.J. Liddell misses the front end of a 1-and-1. Then there's a turnover by E.J. Liddell. Then a missed 3 from Malachi Branham, an offensive foul on Zed Key, and they're getting offensive, just crucial stops on the other end of the floor, but just couldn't convert on the other end. It was just, they were so close. It felt like every time down the floor, I was like, oh, this is it. This is when they're going to do it. And it just never happened. That feels like one that Chris Holtmann's going to see in his sleep, probably for the next few months, just having nightmares about that stretch over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. You go back to the first half, Ohio State was down in that 5 to 9 point range. Ohio State would hit a bucket. Villanova would come back in the other direction and would do something, whether or not it was Colin Gillespie attacking the baseline or an outside shot or something along those lines. They finally start to string the stops together in that stretch you're talking about, and then the offense goes dry, and they're not able to convert at the free throw line and some things on that nature. I mean, there were some hidden points that they weren't able to grab at that point. I'm going to kind of go back and talk about that weird foul that happened as time was expiring at the end of the first half. That gave Villanova a couple of extra points there too. I mean, ultimately in a 10-point margin, 2 points doesn't really matter, but that's one that I'm going to have to go back and check the videotape on, because I don't really understand what happened there either. But yeah, I mean, this Ohio State team all year would just have these long stretches to where, the offense just couldn't necessarily put things together. And it happened once again at the worst possible time when they were getting the stops. And then once Ohio State's like, oh, maybe we should start scoring, they couldn't stop Villanova once again. And then once you put Villanova on the line, that, lights out, because Villanova is the best free throw shooting team in the nation, essentially. And, I only remember really seeing one miss along the way.
Yeah, Villanova was, I saw a stat that they have a chance to pass Harvard's 1984 team as potentially one of the best shooting, or if not the best free throw shooting teams in history. I mean, that's just crazy. Yeah, the call right at the end of the half, it was, the horn sounded, you thought the clock had run out, and they had gotten out of the half down only 7-9, something like that. And they called a foul. They called Eugene Brown for shoving someone with like 1 second left. And it was just like, boy, that was not a foul that needed to be committed. It was probably also not a foul that needed to be called in that situation. So yeah, that was just one of the many just, that was a big moment that Ohio State there was just something that they didn't do that just didn't work out, and you saw those quite a bit. Now, now the question is, what's next for the Ohio State basketball program? You mentioned that, the plan I'm sure for them was get on a plane and go to San Antonio. That is now not what's going to happen. They're going to head back to Columbus. And then what? Because, it's not official yet, but it's likely the last time we're going to see E.J. Liddell in a Buckeye uniform. Malachi Branham has a decision to make. You got some other guys who are going to be leaving after this year. Next year is shaping up to possibly be kind of a make or break one for Chris Holtmann, where you got to maybe see some progress in some form, whether that's a Big Ten title or a Sweet 16 or something like that. So next season is kind of a big one. And that Branham decision feels like that's going to be a huge one for the future direction of the Ohio State program, one way or the other.
Yeah, going into this year, they thought that they were going to get Dwayne Washington back. They didn't get him. Chris Holtmann shared this weekend that even in going and getting Jamari Wheeler, that he was supposed to be kind of a complementary piece to Dwayne Washington. Lo and behold, Washington leaves, and Jamari Wheeler's role is elevated. If you lose Malachi Branham, then I don't necessarily know what's going on at that point. I mean, you do have a talented freshman class coming in. I circle the word freshman. We've seen a team that, even this year seemed to have lapses in terms of what was going on, in terms of what their leadership was, in terms of when they didn't have Kyle Young necessarily in the mix. So they're going to have to hit the portal. They can't go out and they have to go out and get these studs. They just have to do it. And, the portal changes on a daily basis. We don't necessarily know who's in and who's not in at any given time. But Ohio State is going to have to do a lot better job there, because I think that, Malachi Branham bolts early. And, I know we've seen him in the 20s in some of the mock drafts, and mock drafts are sometimes not even worth the paper that they're printed on. But, he's going to have a very real decision to make at that point. But you lose him. What happens if Eugene Brown's like, well, I'm out of here. I mean, I don't necessarily see what my role is going to be. I mean, you could see a mass exodus, and I'm not one of these people who says, oh, well, this is a make or break situation for Chris Holtmann. The first world problems, they're making the tournament every year. I know people want to see them get on further, and that's fine. Have high expectations. That's great. But wait until they sit there and have a bad year. Wait until they finish in the bottom half of the Big Ten. Wait until they go sub 500. Wait till they not get to the tournament. This is a team that has made the tournament every year under Chris Holtmann. The only year they didn't make it, they didn't have a tournament. So I understand the expectations. I understand all of that. But I also don't understand where some of the angst is coming from, because it seems to be misplaced.
Yeah, it has definitely been a weird couple seasons. No tournament, and then the year with the weird COVID year, and they ended up a 2 seed that year and got the matchup with the Oral Roberts. It didn't work out, but and then this year, even this year, you had kind of some COVID fallout with this weird backloaded schedule and having to play 6 games in 8 days or whatever it was at the end of the season or 4 games in 8 days, something like that, to cram in some of those extra games. And that was when Kyle Young was down with the injury, and so you're missing one of your key pieces, and and those losses probably knocked them down a couple slots. So instead of being a 5 seed and playing a 4 on Sunday, you're a 7 seed and you're playing a 2, and your margin for error is just that much smaller. It is, I have not been shy about letting people, talking in the past about individual regular season college basketball games not really meaning that much. And that's, one of the things that people may find it hard to get super into college basketball at times before March. There were some basketball games at the end of February that really ended up coming back to haunt this Ohio State team. I think, if you're playing a 4 seed instead of playing, if you're playing, who did Illinois play today? Illinois lost to Houston. Yeah. So Houston probably would have been a tough out too, but there were some 5 seeds. There were a bunch of 12 seeds that beat 5 seeds. If you get Richmond in the second round instead of getting Villanova in the second round, well, that's a very different matchup for you. So, yeah, this is going to be a very interesting offseason for the Ohio State basketball program. Could be a lot of changes, a lot of new faces, and this is going to be a somewhat high stakes offseason for Chris Holtmann. So, should be a fascinating one to watch. Kevin, thank you for joining me. Thank you for braving the extremely loud media workroom there in Pittsburgh, and for your great coverage all weekend from the NCAA tournament. Have a safe trip home. We will see you back in Columbus. And thank you guys all for joining us as well. Hope you guys have enjoyed a little basketball chat. We'll be back to football later this week. maybe some other stuff as well. We'll see. There's a lot. Mark Givler was at a big football recruit camp this weekend. We'll probably have him on at some point later this week. Ohio State players are back on campus this week following spring break, so we'll have a bunch of spring football coverage as well. Should be a lot of fun stuff to talk about this week. So looking forward to sharing all that with you later on this week. So thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.